it's so in the studio I have the air conditioning on, and so it's kind of chilly in here, which is why I'm wearing a jacket.
Oh, I gotcha.
Outside, and I'm sure it's pretty warm. Anyway, welcome to Owlbear Soup. I'm the one in control of the board, so I'm the one who decides when the transitions come. So it's always a surprise to Rich.
It is. I need that moment of warning, and it's always I don't know, 30 seconds late.
yeah, give or take, right?
Yeah, but that's fun. It's an important thing about soup is that you don't be too timely. It's just like about 5 minutes, or
Yeah. All right. I lost my notes all of a sudden. That's always
no.
How do I do that? All right. Well, anyway. Oh, there it is. I forgot I have multiple. I have so many note programs going on. I'm trying to organize my life a little bit. I'm always trying to do this. So right now it's a combination. I use the Bear app for like notes on my phone, and then they talk to my computer and go back and forth and stuff. And then I'm using a note-taking app on my iPad so I can write stuff. And I'm trying to figure out a way to make everything talk to each other and just combine it all. But anyway.
Wow. I'm always looking for one of those that I will stick with, and I've gotten great recommendations, and then I'll use them for a few minutes, and then I'll just forget.
Right.
I need a note app that takes careful note about which note apps.
Yeah. Which note app has my notes in it?
Exactly.
That's the note app I need.
Wow. I have a wall covered in Post-it notes and in index cards. I've just attached all of it with just big stuff written on it because I kind of need those visuals. So I hear you.
Yeah. Let's see here. So let's kick this week off. Talking about last week.
Okay.
Last week was a big week for you. We announced last Sunday that your birthday was coming up, and
it was a birthday.
Yeah. What'd you do for your birthday?
Well, there's birthdays under quarantine. This I feel like should be a future version of like there should be a French poetic form, just quarantine birthdays at some point, because there's only so much you can do. You gotta get wax poetic about it. Definitely played some Jackbox games over Zoom for just hours, and that's already kind of an intimidating thing because you have a ton of friends. You want to get them on here. You want them all to play, but Jackbox games only take 8 people at a time.
Oh.
So I basically took my friends group and divided them in half. It's like, you are all invited to this team and you are all invited to this team. Just because I didn't, when you're playing those games, like the people that are playing, that's kind of all they're doing.
Yeah.
The people who aren't, like it's harder to engage with them, I guess. The audience can play along or something, but it was just too many people. So it was an interesting social dynamic to decide how to divide things and get people together. But it was great. They were really, really fun games. I had a good time. We played Split the Room, which is the game that I'm learning the most about recently, and I like it a lot. I'm a big fan of like Drawful, Quiplash, all those like quick, funny, like vote for your favorite sorts of things. But Split the Room, have you played this one?
No, I haven't played Split the Room.
It's all about a prompt, and it's a weird, wacky prompt, and you have to fill in the blank on it. You don't want to pick the funniest thing. You're trying to pick something that will, the prompt leads to a yes or no response, and you want half of the people to vote yes and half of them to vote no.
Oh.
So you're trying to be divisive about it.
Huh.
Which changes the dynamic a whole lot. It's not about being funny, but being funny, is fine. We like to laugh, sure. But you want to pick something that people would agree with and disagree with at the same time. Or, just be like, I don't know. So sure, I'll pick yes.
Nice.
It was a lot of fun. That one's a new one that I like a lot. And there's a weird like Twilight Zone cat as the host. So that's cool too.
They always have the weirdest hosts. Like one of the ones I enjoy playing that I'm not very good at. And I play it with Aubrey and our friend Brandy a fair amount is Murder Death Party, or is that what it's called?
The trivia one, right?
Yeah. I like the trivia ones, and I'm not great at trivia, but I still like trivia. It's
Well, I love that one because there is that like catch up mechanic built into there. Like it's such a weird game. I love it. You're answering questions, but the mini games are fun, and I like winning when I've lost at the start. You're just coming back to life and managing to win again.
Usually, if I'm doing very well when we get to that last one, I lose. And normally, if I'm doing very poorly when I get to the last one, I lose. So it really, it's fun. It doesn't. That mechanic.
I'm sensing a different problem. Those are fun. I love those games.
Yeah.
Oh,
a lot of fun.
Other great thing about my birthday is I got 2 cakes.
Oh,
and it's 2 cake birthday during quarantine is too much cake.
Is it too much cake?
It is. But it's been a lot of fun because it's like, well, breakfast. I'm awake now. What should I have? Well, I could have Fruit Loops, but isn't that really just as healthy as eating some cake? And then I just eat some cake. It's been so amazing.
I mean, yes, I think you're right about that. I think Fruit Loops is about as healthy as eating cake.
Right. And then it's like, well, because it's like a pastry then. Cake is just it's a breakfast pastry. And so you have that cake and then you're like, well, should I have like a breakfast dessert? Should I have some of the other cake? It's been tough. Life has been tough for the last few days.
That sounds absolutely devastating.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you survive.
Oh wow! So that's basically been my week. That day was fantastic, and everything else has been writing and preparing to get ready for my summer camp, which starts tomorrow.
Oh yeah,
which should be fun. Yep. I got to send out some final emails today, invite some kids to my D&D Beyond campaigns. That's right. This week I also bought like everything on D&D Beyond, and that was fulfilling. Yeah.
Yeah, I've slowly been like as they've been released, I've been getting them, so I also have everything. But I know initially when that was that first big batch, it was very satisfying to buy that huge chunk and just be like, yes, it's done.
It's good. It's something I've avoided for a long time just because it was like, I'm going to be buying these again. I don't want to buy them again. But digital format is just so helpful, and it's perfect for this camp. So that was kind of built into what I knew I was going to be buying out of this Kickstarter. So,
nice.
Wow. It's great.
Let's see. And then also, it says here that you enjoyed some animated DC Universe cartoons or movies.
I did. I promised that I would watch some DC animated movies. I did. I go through my entire week not remembering that pledge until yesterday. And then I was like, oh, right. I was going to watch one of these. And so I sat down and I watched the Judas Contract.
Yeah, so good.
And then I was like, well, I want to watch more. And so I watched Batman versus Robin. And then I was like, well, now I'm just in and I'm not tired yet. So then I watched Wonder Woman as well.
Oh, nice. All of those are fantastic.
Those are my 3. So
I've seen all of them and I love all of them.
Oh, great. So I guess this is interesting. I know that you're a Titans fan. Yes. Right. But this is one of my first, let's learn about the Teen Titans, actually all the characters and see what's going on. It was really interesting. And I like that movie starts with an older version of the Titans and then comes back to an older version. I'm not sure, a later version. Right. Robin becomes Nightwing.
Exactly. Yeah.
In between the story that happens.
Right. Yeah. It's been a while since I've watched Judas Contract. I recently reread it. And it was written in the, I want to say, late 70s, early 80s. And so it was already Nightwing, but it was the 80s Nightwing where it was kind of like he was wearing like a weird thing around his neck. And it was strange. It was a strange outfit. But I need to rewatch those. And then, let's see, Batman versus Robin, that's dealing with Damian Wayne.
Right.
Is the Council of Owls show up in that one?
Yeah, they're the big bads in that one, which was very cool because, again, that's something I've been aware of, but they don't show up in the games. Like, I've played all the Arkham games, which is just everybody, right? It's everybody, but the Court of Owls, I've just never seen them, and so this was a cool little introduction.
Yeah.
a full introduction, I guess. That's
Yeah,
it's pretty comprehensive.
And even so, there's still like a relatively newish threat in the DC universe. Like I don't think we were hearing about the Court of Owls in the 90s or even the Double Aughts. I think it's like within the last like 5 to 10 years.
Interesting.
Probably within the last 5 years, but I'm slowly catching up with a lot of my DC reading.
Got it. Yeah, they're interesting because you don't like Gotham doesn't really have a place for this like powerful elite that is trying to control everything, like the Illuminati of Gotham. Just right. It almost takes away from Gotham is this place where like criminals are running so much and like the mob is such a powerful influence. Like I never thought that, well, the elites are also just a separate sphere doing the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, of course they are, right?
Yeah. But it was like, you know, you go into the sewer and you go into their auditorium and it's filled with like hundreds of members of the Court of Owls. And it's like, where did all these folks come from?
Right.
Like in when Bruce Wayne hosts a fundraiser in Batman 2, you know, whatever, The Dark Knight Rises, are all those members Courts of Owls? Like, is that who's filling the entire room until the Joker shows up?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna have to rewatch all this. I'm
just
wow. Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. Yeah, there's a bunch of really good storylines that deal with the Court of Owls now, including the most recent, like not the most recent, but recently Metal, which was a very popular storyline that crossed several issues, was kind of kicked off by the Court of Owls. So anyway, it's pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I'm happy to learn more. That's a lot of fun. I'm really excited about that. I think I just saw myself being a little frozen on the screen, so I'm gonna shut a couple things down. There we go.
You look good over here. So
I looked a little like I had my fist up for something, and it just felt like I was just.
It was up for just a little too long.
Yeah, I'm not that angry. I just. But it was also cool seeing Damian Wayne, right? That's also, I don't know when Damian became a character.
He's also a relatively new character. Yeah, he's been a really good Robin. I've read about him in a few others, and he kind of takes a little bit of the the anger that Jason Todd had, along with like his assassin upbringing and his black and white morality in trying to be, he's trying to be the Bat, right? That's the difference between like Damian Wayne as to Robin, Dick Grayson, Jason Todd, Stephanie Brown, or Tim Drake, right? Like all of them, like they were Robin, and then they've gone on to do other things. But none of them, except Dick Grayson, has ever been Batman, right? Dick Grayson was Batman temporarily for a little while.
That's right, yeah.
And we would assume that naturally he would be the next person to take the mantle anyway. But now Damian Wayne's there, so
yeah. I feel like Damian Wayne is gonna be it, down the line.
Yeah.
Until we get to Batman Beyond, I suppose that kind of breaks the whole that future moment where you're like, wait, none of them become Batman. It's this other.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing about A, comics, and B, specifically DC, is DC often plays with the idea of 52 a lot. So there are 52 different universes for the DC universe, essentially, right? And they all kind of interact and are slightly different. So, the Terry McGinnis Batman Beyond future may not be the same future we're heading to in current storyline, which is Damian Wayne, right? Or it may be, maybe Damian dies, or maybe Damian becomes the next Ra's al Ghul, right? Who knows?
Yeah, sure. That makes sense. It's funny because I, just watching the Legends of Tomorrow season 5 just showed up on Netflix, so I was able to finish watching Crisis on Infinite Earths, and finalize the collapse of the entire multiverse into just the one CW world.
Right.
That's very interesting to me. That's very interesting. Now they can all like just adventure with each other all the time, but stuff happened like during. I don't know if you watched parts of the crossover, but like the Flash from the Justice League movie is in the crossover events for a moment, right? So, is that character
Ezra Miller
gone? Ezra Miller, that's right. Is that character gone, or are they all? It's all wild. It's all very interesting. So I'm curious to see how that goes up. I love that the very first thing that happens is Lex Luthor earns a Nobel Peace Prize.
Well, I mean, in the comics he was president, so
Right.
yeah.
But it came from Supergirl. I think that he is seen as pretty bad, pretty negative, but he had helped like rewrite this whole universe, and so that was one of his like little things, is he's going to be seen as totally positive from then on. So I'm kind of excited to see where Supergirl takes that. It's just fun. What else was I going to say about Titans? I had so much to say about Titans.
Titans so good.
Because it was very good, and that movie was very good, and I liked that. I grew up with the X-Men. That was my my young thing. But like, it's an interesting difference between the two teams, because the X-Men for the most part have a pretty shared background. I mean, yes, there is some variance, but for the most part, their powers started and they were like, oh my gosh. And the Titans come from all over the place. Like, that's a bigger deal in their stories, is that they're so wildly different. And that was cool to see their cohesiveness when they don't have that like perfectly shared moments in their background. So that was kind of fun. I'm curious how you see those two teams, or just Titans. Tell me more Titan stuff.
Yeah, I love Titans. I think the Titans is a great team, but I like superhero teams, and I like following superheroes, which I think is why I like DC. Right. And not to say that, they're not superheroes in Marvel or anything, but in Marvel, you follow Tony Stark. You don't follow Iron Man. In DC, you follow Batman. You don't follow Bruce Wayne, right? So like, that's the kind of the difference there, right? Mm-hmm. You follow Steve Rogers, not Captain America.
Sure.
Right. When you look at X-Men, they all kind of come from that same background, but it's telling a very different story. It's telling, the story of oppression and that type of stuff. And it's, and you have the characters communicating to each other in ways that ground it a lot more and take it out of clouds, make it more like they're real people interacting with each other who happen to also be superheroes. You take a DC comic like Titans or Teen Titans, especially, at that time when the Judas Contract was coming out, they didn't refer to each other that much as their real person name. It was always, it wasn't Dick. It was, Robin or Nightwing, right? It wasn't Chorus or Kara so much. It was Starfire, right? You don't call him Garfield or Gar very much. You mostly call him Beast Boy when you're interacting with him, right? Yeah. So so it's that subtle difference. And part of the neat thing about the Titans is a couple of them were sidekicks, a couple of them were just younger heroes trying to find a place, and then they brought this team together, and it's been a very interesting team to watch over time.
Interesting.
Check out Young Justice if you ever want to watch a really good animated show that's it's not about the Titans, but it's kind of about the Titans.
Very cool. I can go do that next. That'll be good. That'll be my watching for today, maybe. No. Okay. Just get right to it. Yeah. Cool. Well, it's been good, like getting immersed in DC a lot. I'm glad that we got the HBO Max subscription, and it's like, boom, here's all these DC things. Yeah. Which is great. I'm just gonna eat them all up.
Do it. Let's see here. And then one more thing before we get on to our topic of building dungeons. You had some thoughts on Sudoku that you teased me with that has been eating in the back of my brain. And I wanted to touch base on that real quick.
Okay. So I've mentioned this because I'm kind of a Sudoku fan, but not like really, not like I'm going to get super intense on it. But I know that there are championships, just like there's crossword championships and all these other things. Two British champions for the last, I don't know, like 3 years have had this YouTube channel called Cracking the Cryptic. And I have never watched it up until recently.
That channel, let me tell you what.
And basically every single day, one of the two of them just solves a Sudoku. And sometimes they are ones that are sent in from their fans or whatever else. They will take those problems and they will write them into their apps. And they're also kind of selling these apps for, like $6 with different styles and whatever. Not super interesting so far. That's fine. They're good at Sudoku. That's fine. There's people that are good at lots of things. 2 months ago, they posted one video in particular. And it's the one that now has, I think, 3.6 million views.
Yeah. Oh, did I send you that one as well? But you would have said you'd already seen it or whatever.
Oh, yes. Right. So you've seen it. You've seen it. the super calm, like state of wonder that he goes through solving this Sudoku puzzle that he doesn't think can be solved. Like, there's only 4 numbers on it. He doesn't see how that can possibly be enough to solve the entire thing. And as he's doing it, he, as an expert, is surprised at the solution, which is a very cool thing.
Yeah, it's just such a reserved delightment. It's he's so reserved in his excitement, but at the same time he's like, oh my, oh this works. Oh no, but then that means then that means this, and then, it is just like it escalates, and it's such a, while still staying very reserved, his excitement is being escalated, and it's just like you're kind of waiting for him to explode, but it's so engaging, and it's such fun to watch. I'll post a link to it in the Discord later.
That one is very good. But since then, I've watched, I don't know, like 20 more videos on that channel. And they're not all the same. I mean, some of them, they are, some of them are much harder than others. So you as a viewer can't sort of figure it out. But in the specific one, it's so cool because you can actually like play the game as they're playing it. All those puzzles are also posted in the description, so you can play along with them, but they're much faster than you. That's just the way it is. But because they're both super champions, whatever else. But some of those puzzles are really, really good. They're really fun. They have cool, unique properties. And as they're doing it, you'll get that continued sense of like, oh my goodness. Like some of them are like miracle Sudokus. They're ones that, again, they don't seem like they should be solvable. And as he's going through it and thinking out loud, you get to watch this expert be like amazed. And that's incredible. That's a thing that I personally love watching.
Yeah. I've during the quarantine, it's like I've discovered a couple more of those things that I just really like are delightful to watch on YouTube. That and then the marble racing. Are both they're just both so delightful to watch, and the announcer in the marble racing is so good. It's so good.
He is. He's very impressive. I like it a lot.
Yeah. But, all right. Well,
that's my YouTube viewing, I guess.
Yeah. No, I'm into it. Like, I'll post a link to that Sudoku in the Discord later. But now let's get to the topic at hand.
Oh,
which is dungeon design. That's This was the phrase that we mentioned. We didn't go into too much detail as to how we were going to talk about this. So I'm interested to see how we both are going to come at this from. Do you have any initial thoughts before I get into my 60 pages of notes?
Oh my gosh.
In that I have like 3 things written on a piece of paper right here.
Hey, that's fantastic. I opened a couple of the dungeons that I have written out, and I find that I tend to make 2 kind of dungeons. So that's where I'm going to start.
Okay.
Is I will make dungeons that are at the end of adventures. You do a whole thing, blah blah blah, and you get to this dungeon, and because it's within like an adventure time frame, that dungeon now has like I don't know, maybe a skill challenge and then a combat. Right? It's basically a cave. It's like a final scene for the most part. And I'll make dungeons that are the entire adventure. Right. And so those have very different styles of how you set them up or whatever else. One of them I intend for players probably to maybe rest up before they go in for this one combat. And the other one is now this like resource draining sprawl. Like I don't actually want you to sleep in this dungeon. I want you to like, this is a tactical challenge. This one is kind of a Nova challenge over here. So those are kind of how like when I start looking at a dungeon, those are the ways I kind of frame them at the beginning. Like, is this going to be a Nova dungeon or is this going to be like a dungeon?
Yeah. When you're looking at dungeons and when you're considering what you're building for the players, is a dungeon always, this underground crypt type of thing that we're all thinking of, or is a dungeon merely an area that the players cannot easily leave, that has separate, smaller areas within it with encounters?
Sure.
so a little bit depends on which variation, right? Could a mansion be a dungeon?
Oh. See, I say yes.
Right. No, I agree. Right. Because everything from the courtyard is its own encounter, and then you go through a door and it moves to another encounter, and then you have options that will lead you to yet other potential encounters.
Right. So
Yes.
it's more like a framework, right? Where we're
Yeah.
discussing not that a dungeon is a specific like underground thing. It's a play style, right?
Yeah.
Where you are in, I don't know, can we define it? It's an isolated enclosure of some kind, maybe? Or it's a place where you can't easily rest, right? So you're always tense and you're moving from room to room to room to room to room.
Yeah, and there's I feel like there's some level of investigation going on, whether that's you're trying to find your way out or your way to something.
Mm-hmm.
So, so trying to define what a dungeon is, I think for me allows me to, because I like looking at the mechanics of things and then putting the dressing on top of it, right? So could I build this mansion adventure the same way I would build a dungeon adventure? And I think so, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be the same kind of principles. And I'm going to steal a lot for this because I've from other great minds, because when thinking about dungeons, and this is the way I think about them now too, because I've seen this so much, is in your dungeon there's 5 types of rooms. Right?
Oh, okay.
A good dungeon, a good small dungeon has 5 rooms. So first you have your entrance. Right? That's your first room. Maybe there's an encounter there. Maybe it's just bringing you in. This, the second one is the puzzle.
Okay.
So that's the second type of room. This room has a puzzle, something to solve, some kind of thing to move forward, a puzzle. All right. The third type of room is the setback, right? Okay. So the setback is that. Yeah, it's some kind of trick or trap or something that impedes the hero's progress, right? And then there's the boss fight. Yeah, that's where you that's your dragon. That's the thing right before the very end. And then there's the reward room, which is like an antechamber with like the loot or even just something that wraps up the story. Or if you're trying to escape the dungeon, that's the wide world, right? The exit.
Huh. Okay, I've built that 5-room dungeon. I just never thought about it like that.
Yeah. There's a lot of if you look D&D Beyond. James Heck, he did a article at D&D Beyond called "Designing Designing the Dungeon, Your First Dungeon," and he talks a lot about the idea of the 5 types of rooms. And there's this, I think it's on Strollin.com. He goes into more depth about the 5-room dungeon, and they both say that when you design your dungeon, only design 5 rooms, so that's the entire dungeon. So that's a very short dungeon.
Yeah, right. If you think about that dungeon, that's let's see, 5 rooms. And saying it that way, probably combat's in 2 of them. So if we're talking about a classic experience gaining expedition, that's a fraction. That's
right.
2/13 of the experience you need for a level, right?
Yeah. So for me, like the 5-room dungeon is a little bit too small, but I like using the idea of there's 5 different types of rooms.
Yeah.
And then so when you're building the rooms, I like the idea of like Aubrey said, it's no Dungeon and a Mad Mage, right? So within those rooms, then you build out your dungeon. You label them, like if you're drawing it out. For me, it's like, okay, here's the E for entrance, here's P for puzzle, here's S for setback, here's B, here's where the boss fight is, and here's the reward, right?
Oh wow.
And then you start building out from there, and then so what kind of rooms, and then you try to, or at least for me, you try to break up what encounters they'll have. Are they going to be having a puzzle? Are they going to be having a setback? Or is this the boss fight? Different things like that. And they're mostly going to be puzzles and setbacks, right? Most of the rooms that have some kind of interaction. Okay. Then I drop, the dressing on top of them, right? So you look at your who, what, when, where, why. And I think James Heck kind of goes into this as well. Who is going to be in this room? What is in this room? Why does this room exist? Where, that's right. And when do you want your players to encounter it? That's the win, right? Because you can position, your players, and most players tend to act very similarly in dungeons. So you can kind of control when certain things hit them. So I don't know. I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but
no, this is good. This is great.
Yeah, so for me, designing a dungeon, it's a whole lot of like putting those pieces together.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, honestly, like, even using the idea of the 5 rooms, a lot of times the boss fight for me is also a puzzle, right? It's a combination. So I see no reason of combining those types of rooms. So you could have a puzzle and a setback together, right? Oh, well, you have these things on the floor that you have to interact with. Meanwhile, kobolds are just pouring in, right?
Right.
And the only way to stop kobolds from pouring in is to finish the puzzle. And then you still have kobolds to deal with, and then you finish the puzzle, and then you find your way out, right? It's the layering that I think for me at least, layering those types of things makes the individual encounters exciting.
Yeah, and I think especially for like a boss style event, right? Some event style, that's fantastic because it means I don't need to just have like, here is my big super monster that's going to crush you. You can ease off on a little bit of that and make it more dynamic by adding these puzzle elements. It's, forcing the party to split up and split their focus is always fun, more than just like, well, I'll fight the big thing and you like take out these little things on the edges. You fight the minions, warlock. Those were the days. But yeah, I like that idea a lot. When you were talking, I was almost thinking about, as a DM, like almost not having a map in mind, but more having these specific encounters in mind and being like, oh, so you head towards this one. Well, that's a puzzle. Here we are in the puzzle room.
Right. That's totally one way you could do it too, right? Is you have no puzzle drawn. You just have a spreadsheet of, here is all the different rooms in the dungeon. Here is when I hope that they will encounter it in the timeline. And then, it takes away some of the choice of the players, but they don't know that because they still feel the choice as they're going through, right? So it streamlines what you're doing as a DM, as well as giving them the option as a player to kind of explore a little. And then you can even do things where like, oh, okay, they investigate this way. All right, well, here's the clue as they get for this room, clue to get for that room, and then it's like whatever way they go, they get that interaction.
Well, let me ask you a specific question. So we are now in 5th ed, which is a time of trust and joy. I grew up with 2nd ed, which I had multiple DMs, especially in high school, who were like, if you're not mapping the dungeon, you're going to get lost. Like, I'm going to make sure you get lost. How many of your players in the modern age map out your dungeons?
It depends, right? So if I'm doing something like, we recently, and I think in my Carthon campaign that we wrapped up recently, we did it in 2 different ways depending. Okay. If it was a dungeon that was designed a little bit to get them a little lost, right? Then I would have them map it out. Okay. If that wasn't part of the idea behind the dungeon, then, because of the way I have everything set up, I'm able to put the dungeon on a screen back behind me and just kind of uncover it. And I was using Photoshop and I was just uncovering a black layer as they continued forward to kind of do the mapping. Because, now that I'm doing Dungeon and Mad Mage on Roll20, I just uncover the map and they always have access to the map, which I think it's better.
Yeah. I agree, right? But there is this idea, that my players, for the most part, unless I tell them specifically otherwise, like they trust me not to mess with them because they're not, they don't have graph paper of their own that they are mapping out this dungeon, right? They're sure they're going to be able to get out unless I have let them know a complication is going to arise, which I just find very different from those older days where I was always drawing out the entire dungeon so I could be like, well, we haven't gone left. Way back here, there's probably and our DM isn't going to just allow us to finish the dungeon or something. So I need to make sure I get back there to find the treasure that I want or something like that. Like this idea of like, I have control about how I move through this dungeon. Maybe there's a cool thing I haven't sorted out over here I want to go check out before the last room. I don't play that way so much anymore, which means that kind of the random dungeon would work, just because I don't have a perfect map of how it's set up. I'm kind of theater of the minding it anyways, maybe. And, they're not mapping it out. So is that part of the agreement that we've kind of made these days?
Well, I think, at least for me and my group, we all played a lot of fourth edition, and fourth edition did not really do well with the dungeon crawly encounter structure,
Mhm.
just because of the way it was built. And, in between combats, you'd have your skill challenges. So a lot of times whenever, ooh, are you still with us, Rich? Oh, there you are. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
I was afraid you froze.
Got a wave in the chat. I wanted to say hello.
Oh,
We got Raven. We got
hey,
Melchizedek. That's awesome.
yeah, awesome.
Welcome.
Yeah, I love Typo Fulfillment, Mental Evil. But yeah, I think fourth edition kind of, for me at least, broke the way um, we did dungeons in my groups, because it was more encounter based. Your traps would be skill challenges, right? In fourth edition, so it became more of a you're narrating the dungeon, you're storytelling the dungeon, as opposed to sitting there and drawing it out on a piece of paper, right?
Right.
It feels a little more adventure-y as well. I think it tells a better story if you're not sitting there graphing the paper. And it and some of that, I think, has bled over to the way we do fifth edition as well, where if it's not part of the story, if it's not important for the story, I'm just going to let them see the map as they uncover it. And and I think that works better for traps too, right? Because I'll do things and I'll uncover like as far as they can see, and then as they move their minis, because it's on roll 20, and it'll be very similar whenever we're doing back to home games. Then if they encounter traps, then we get to roll for traps, right?
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah, and in a lot of senses, I think that's one of the things that in a dungeon specifically that bums people out who haven't had a dungeon experience. They've watched movies. You watch Scooby-Doo. They don't search every single room of the mansion. You just see the important ones.
exactly.
And if I need to drag them through a dungeon where they do have to look in every room and find out like, oh, there's nothing in there, and I know these levels exist on Dungeons of the Mad Mage. This room has some crates in it, but they're all burnt, and there's nothing important in this room. Like, well, did I need to look in it? Did I need to have my players look in it? Can I have that minute back?
Right.
And so I'm usually okay with that because that is still part of the dungeon like aesthetic that we're used to. But I've got some players who are like, this is not fun.
Yeah, I don't want my players to check every door in every room, right?
But then if they're not, then I'm just leading them through to the next thing, right?
Yeah.
So there's got to be some sort of like, well, you search a couple rooms down here and you don't tend to find anything. You do find this, right? And that kind of lends itself almost to that I don't want to say I want to run my games based on a spreadsheet, but still
Right.
kind of.
Yeah. Usually, at least in Mad Mage so far, as to what I've seen, it's the doors that have additional description are the ones that are worth investigating, whether they're locked or trapped or none of the above. And I think that's the kind of design I would go if I were to create my own dungeon and publish it in any way, is the rooms that have the box text where you're talking about the entire dressing of the room. That's the room you want to investigate.
Right.
If you walk into a room, you say, all right, well, this room has some haystacks in the corner. Clearly this is where goblins sleep. I mean, oh, sure. What do? You check the haystacks. Why do you bother with the door? I didn't say anything about the door, right? Instead you come into this room and there's beautiful rugs on the floor, and the candles flicker as the air moves as you open the door, and the door is this ornate thing with a bas relief of dwarves on it or something, right? Then you investigate the door.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot more sense. Yeah. Designing a dungeon is hard because I do remember the days of like, hey, where's the bathroom in this dungeon? Where do all the goblins go to the bathroom?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, okay, yeah, I see your point, but also that's not an interesting room,
No.
and spending any of our time as players on the goblin bathroom. How much does that add to our adventure?
I mean, unless it's an outhouse in front of a cave that you're supposed to go investigate.
Right. And you're like, what's that doing there?
And then the purple worm eats you.
Yeah. Oh, no, this is a reference I don't know.
Oh, okay. There was this competition type thing that happened at PAX early on in 5th edition, where it was the most dangerous dungeon.
Okay.
And the first thing you see the cave entrance, but there's an outhouse that you can go in as you're about to enter the dungeon. And if you go in the outhouse, it triggers like the biggest final monster in the entire dungeon, and it's a giant purple worm. It just eats people. So good.
Wow. So all these parties go up and they make the same joke. Like, does anyone need to go before we, start our adventure? Wow.
The first one to go snarky. Yep. Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
I'll do it there. Roll initiative.
Unbelievable.
Oh, man.
That's what puns get you. That's
yeah. But the thing about the Mad Mage though is there are some restrooms within its halls, and they put them in there because nerds ask about them.
Right. It makes sense for the full ecosystem of the whole thing. And I hear that. When I design a dungeon, I try to think about that ecosystem, like how do people live in here, But as an explorer going in, there's parts of that I just want to hand wave. Like this is the complex where the goblins hang out and cook food and go to the bathroom. Let's skip that. And I want to be able to just skip it.
And I'm pretty like, the who, what, when, where, why, I think is an important thing to ask whenever you're designing your entire dungeon, and then to keep that in mind as you're creating each individual room, because Mad Mage plays around with it because of magic, but in certain dungeons you don't want to, okay, so now this room is all like dark and dreary and water's dripping down the walls and and it's puddling up and it smells kind of dank. Meanwhile, the next room is a fiery hot forge, right? You want some continuity there.
So you got to put some stuff in the way to kind of
Mad Mage does a good job of using magic to hand wave some of the weirdness. Like, the next level we're going to go on is a really weird level where it doesn't feel like a dungeon at all.
Oh, cool.
But yeah. We'll talk about that after they explore it a little bit.
That sounds good. Yeah, I'm trying to remember the only level that I've really researched, but it's not one of the first levels, so we'll wait on that one.
Yeah, I think it's their next level. They may explore it a little bit this upcoming week. So
very cool. That is fun. I'm trying to think. Dungeons. A lot of this is why I tend to have found myself more recently, at the very least, making shorter dungeons. This 5-room dungeon is kind of like not without, not really thinking about it that way, but I've kind of limited things, really, brought them down, scaled them down just so things are a lot clearer and a lot simpler. So I've done more dungeons recently where it's like, this is the, like the guild house hangouts, this is where the shaman is staying or something like that, the goblin shaman. But not everybody is here, so I don't need to worry about those filler moments. And it's just like, it's just, yes, okay, entryway, setback, trap, boss.
Yeah, I like the idea, like, of smaller dungeons here and there, like sprinkled, and then you have your one big dungeon. Like if that's what you're going for, if you're going for more dungeon crawly D&D or Pathfinder or Starfinder or whatever, or any RPG, I do like the idea. And the more I kind of researched on this, I like the idea of having a bunch of small dungeons that all kind of lead up to the big one, right? And the big one, for me, the big one's fun to design and fun to build, but it takes time. And there's a lot of things in that dungeon that the players won't see. So I have to, think about that whenever I'm building it. And that's kind of the advantage of the 5-room dungeon. It's just like, oh, well, yeah, they're going to see all 5 rooms. There's only 5.
Right? So they'll see it all. I was talking to someone recently, and I can't remember who it was, but the conversation was about dungeons that, and these exist in video games at the very least, a dungeon that you go to, you play for a while, and you come to a moment of realization that the rest of this dungeon is harder. I'm not leveled for this. I have to leave and then come back. And that person was telling me about how they had like almost stairways that would lead to those moments. So that basically, like, you go through dungeon A and then see dungeon B and go, no thanks, and you would just take stairs immediately out. And then when you returned, you would just go down those stairs and be at B. So you wouldn't have to like wade through part A again. I don't think I've ever played a dungeon like that, but I was immediately like, oh my gosh, now we have this site that is canonized in our campaign. This is a place we must return to later. We're going to be thinking about this for levels until we can come back. That sounds fun, and I don't have an example of a dungeon like that. I don't know if there's one in Classic.
Dungeon of the Mad Mage.
Oh well, sure.
I mean, and it does, right? The players have just now gotten to the point where they're starting to uncover the portals that will lead them to lower levels. And there is a former student of Hollister who speaks to them anytime they try to go through one of these portals that they're underleveled for.
Yeah,
it's like, essentially, are you sure you want to do that? But they're getting to that point where they'll be able to traverse between levels a lot more freely than they would before. And had I not eliminated their ability to go back to Waterdeep, due to, I haven't revealed everything to the players, so I'm not gonna. Maybe next week, due to circumstances, they just know that there was a collapsing of the first level, and there's a bunch of nonsense that happened up above. They don't know all the details, so I'm not gonna go into it too much.
Sure.
Aubrey, listening closely, trying to get spoilers.
Oh, that's fantastic.
But the fact that they can jump between the levels is starting to become a little bit more apparent as they're going deeper. And they're getting to the point too where they can start going through these portals and not getting that warning from the student going, oh, hey, by the way, you probably shouldn't go there. It's a little too hard for you, right?
Oh, interesting. So they'll have to figure it out for themselves once they get to that level?
Well, no, now they're to the point where it's like those levels aren't so much of a challenge.
Oh, I see.
So say they're going to a level that's geared for level 8 now, I think. So they go to a level that's geared for 8, they're fine. Yeah. Or they go back to a level that's geared for 3, they're fine, right? So they're getting to that point where they can do some of those transitions. And then, and there may or may not be reasons on later levels to go back levels, to go communicate with NPCs there, that type of stuff. So I think it's going to be an interesting thing as we get deeper and they have a lot more of these connections.
Yeah, that's interesting because that feels like the kind of thing I hope there are notes like, okay, well, on this level, there's, these portals and they go here and here, right? Those are the kind of notes as a player that I would want to have so that I have that access. And then I would just trust you to be like, okay, when I say, I want to go back to level 2, so that'll lead the portal to level 4, and then I can talk to this person and just, I'm not I need to go to the right and then left, but I know where those connections are. That's very cool. I thought you were saying like their 8th level, this portal will take them to a 14th level sort of area, and the student just doesn't care about warning you anymore. It's just like, it's a good joke.
It's like, no, not quite.
That's amazing.
What are key things you put in your dungeons? So we've talked about like the overall structure of what each room could be, and mixing and matching, and some other ideas of how to create the rooms. But what are some like sacred cows to you that hey, I'm making a dungeon, this needs to be, if not in there, it needs to be talked about or expressed?
Gotcha. I will say that every dungeon that I make has to have a reward for exploration. I just want it in there. I want something like a treasure that is hidden in there that you can find if you look in this specific place in this specific way. Just because I think it's fun. Something that's maybe not be, part of the story. I do have, I have a dungeon that's in Rise of the Champions. So I wrote this. I played it with my, my party here, and it was a fun dungeon. They were busting all the way through it. They're trying to track down this group that has infiltrated this kind of like sewer lair. Not a long dungeon, but there's a big flooded area, and there's like a bridge that goes across it, and there's a doorway that goes down into these rooms that are flooded. The bridge you can drop down in that area as well. You can totally avoid it because there is like a giant crocodile down there. But if you take out the crocodile, or if you go swimming down there, there is like a broom of flying down on the bottom, and they were so excited about it, it eventually became like an artifact that I wrote up in a different book because it was just tons of fun. This like semi-intelligent broom of flying that is kind of a coward. Mm-hmm. And so, well, like you can't go like sword fight while you're on this broom of flying, but has the ability to kind of like try and save you, and it gives you a defensive edge and things like that. It was a lot of fun, and it's kind of a device that I liked a lot, but it was a reward for exploration. It wasn't, it's not part of the storyline. It's just there. And I think that's really important. Like here's a river, it's kind of poisoned. So yes, you need to cross it, but also if you like swim up it a little bit or swim down it a little bit, like take some chances. There's objects up there, there's things. I love those because exploration for me is such an important part of the game. I want to reward that.
Yeah, I will never say puzzles are the most important part of the game to me. Mm-hmm. But I like putting in, I like putting in puzzles that I don't have a solution to. Like I'm going to straight up, like this is one of my favorite things to do is I like putting out situations that I don't have a solution to. And I will do that, not necessarily just puzzles, but other ways, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and I want to create the opportunity for the players to come up with interesting ways to circumvent this particular issue, right? And sometimes I have a solution in mind, but mm-hmm. I will always defer to the players. If they come up with something awesome and it's nothing like what I had designed, and in fact, in my original design that wouldn't work, well, it works now, right?
Yeah.
So, and I like things that engage that kind of thinking in my players. So, mm-hmm. I'll say puzzles, right? Even though it's not really puzzles, it's only kind of puzzles, but the idea that I will set up a room with no obvious solution and then let the players find whatever the solution is.
Yeah. That's very good. There is a book on the DMs Guild, and it's called Puzzles, Problems, and Predicaments, something like that.
Yeah.
And that author has put out a second one, and it's all O's, so it's obstacles and something else. Opportunities maybe. But the first one is really cool because it does kind of basically what you said. Like I read through it and I looked at the first page and I was like, cool, a ropes puzzle. I want to know more about. Oh, it's just mostly like, here's how you could set up a ropes puzzle, right? It gives you this outline, but there's no solution to it because it's like, well, it kind of depends on where you are, and maybe you set up something on the wall that tells you exactly how to pull these ropes in the right orders and things like that. But I liked it because, as you're saying, right, it's the opportunity for a puzzle. It's the opportunity to think through something and for the players to come up with what the solution would be. Mm-hmm. And for that type of thinking, it's a great resource. Yeah. I think it's a platinum book already. Like nice. folks like that book.
Nice. Yeah, I like finding ways to engage the players in conversation because, the more the players talk about what's going on, the more pressure it takes off me as the DM to fill that time either with stuff to push the story along, or really like think everything out because, I'm just farming them for ideas, right? The more the players talk, the more interesting ideas I have. And I think that's a great way for the collaborative storytelling process to work too, is just taking their ideas, because then what they're interested in, what they're excited about. Mm-hmm. So then you can just kind of use those and propagate what's coming up with some of that information in mind.
Yeah, that's very cool because it just keys into the things that have sparked in their memory and they're holding on to, right? That's a very cool idea. I like that a lot. A little bit more freedom. I would always, just have something in the like if you investigate the room, you're going to find, the cryptic thing that will give you the solution you need for this thing over there. But I like that idea that they're the ones that need to come up with it, and I can just add some extra. I could add the right combination lock to it,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Like, is there a bookcase in the room? Yes. I go and I start pulling the books. Oh, okay. What are you looking for? Oh, I'm looking for a secret door. Okay. Well, you pull X book and it slides open, right? That wasn't there before. It's there now, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it slides open and it's, a monster comes out, something, right? Or it's another tunnel, or it's that special treasure that they get for exploring and solving puzzles, right? That type of stuff. And they created that portion of the dungeon or even the encounter themselves as the players, right? Yeah. They created that bit, not me. And so then the dungeon becomes collaborative.
Mm-hmm. It's very smart. I'm seeing why you might want a spreadsheet while you're creating these dungeons.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Leave them open to this kind of like improvisational dungeon creation.
A little bit, right?
I like it.
I love the idea of the spreadsheet with the various types of rooms, especially in a home game. Like Mad Mage, of course, I'm not doing that because right, I am allowing some of the players to help dictate what happens in the dungeon a little bit. And then I change those, and then I'm actually, I'm ruining my book by making little notes in my book, but whatever. It's my book. I do what I want.
Happens, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so
very cool.
That's I would say that's my primer on dungeon design.
That's pretty good. Good. Wow. Now I want to design more dungeons. Especially a bigger one. That's a challenge for me. Is the super dungeon that we're gonna. I don't want to actually. Forget that word. I'm not going to say super dungeon out loud. Those are terrifying to me. Like I can't write Dungeon of the Mad Mage, but the major dungeon that we're like leading up to with these smaller, more explorative dungeons, that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we are pretty close to end of time. And I wanted to hit this question that I saw on the D&D Next Reddit because it just kind of, it felt like something that, maybe we'll want to explore further, but, in the next couple of minutes, which non-5e books have added the most to your 5e games? And I guess this is kind of true of any RPG, right? Which non of that RPG books have added to your RPG games? So, for instance, I still use the 4th edition Dungeons Master Guide all the time, right? Okay. I use that in my 5th edition, right? So that's one example. Another example is I am a huge fan of the Expanse. So, I look at the way that they do party building and the way the characters interact and the story is set before them. And I use those to, change the way I present my game for my players.
I like that. Okay. Have you seen the Expanse role-playing game?
I have. I have not played it. Okay. I've not purchased it. I want to do both, but I just haven't done it yet.
Yeah, I understand. They added a thing in there, and it's from Blue Rose. The game is based on the age system, so it has stunts. And one of the things Blue Rose does is if you have a relationship with someone, then you can like do free stunts if it affects them. In a limited way. There's a way to access this. And the Expanse does the same thing. So you have these relationships. That's part of your character, is building a team. And I love that. That's super smart. Those relationship things I think are very, very cool. I like them out of Fiasco, trying to just build up your party a little bit, like good for session 0 style things. We talked about that a little bit. Oh, wow. A resource I go back to. I do own almost every 3rd ed Eberron book. And we're playing 5th ed Eberron right now, so I pull from those all the time. That seems like cheating, though.
No, I don't think so, right? Eberron has changed. You're not just using the 5th edition Eberron resources. You're using the 3rd edition.
That's true, but a lot of it is just for like historical reasons. Like my character that I'm playing is a deserter half elf who's been around, for 60 years or so in the last war. So I need to use the Forge of War as like my personal resource. I got to know what happened.
I had one campaign that was a steampunk D&D campaign, and part of it was it took place in London. In the Victorian times. Yeah. And of course they had to investigate the killings of Jack the Ripper because that's what you do, right? So for that one, I pulled from, some of the stuff I knew from Sherlock Holmes, as well as real information about the Jack the Ripper killings, so that I, even down to like where they were, it's like I used that on the map that we used for the game. It's like, okay, well, here's this investigation, right?
Wow. That's impressive. That's a good resource. Gosh, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I want to do some research and look at my shelf is just too far away. I can't see it.
Well, maybe we'll hit on this topic again soon. I think we could fill an hour talking about things that are inspirations for D&D.
I
started doing a little bit of this with other media, like on my blog talking about things like My Hero Academia and what we can learn from My Hero Academia and and bring it into our role-playing games.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say I just came out of nowhere. Magic the Gathering I use quite a bit because it's so easy to throw a card down and be like, that's the monster, that's its name. And I have a couple art books. Okay. And those are fantastic for the same sort of thing. Like just having a resource full of incredible art is such a cool, it's so easy to reskin monsters and just be like, you are fighting this thing, and just pull it open and be like, everyone freak out right now. And then just use the stats for like a dire wolf or something.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Oh, reskinning is so much fun.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that wraps it up for this week. You can find me on the internet at 2HitAC. 2HitAC0 is my tag on most social medias. You can hunt me down there. You can also see me Tuesday. I forget my schedule now. Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. I'll be DJing at the Dread Pirate Rabbits Twitch channel. That's twitch.tv/Dread Pirate Rabbits. And and then of course I'll be active in the Discord. I'm going to be doing some rearranging of some of the chats, trying to clean it up. Now that we're combining both Dread Pirate Rabbits, Owl Bear Soup, and potentially Atomic Game Theory fans all into one community. There's a lot of crossover. Made sense to kind of combine it. And then how about you, Rich? What's going on with you this upcoming week?
This is going to be a busy week for me. You can find me in all sorts of places at R. Molina. You can't see me while I'll be teaching D&D summer camp all week long. But I think my next project that will be out is a look at investigative adventures specifically and how they are different from regular ones. I just recorded an hour-long seminar, and someone said that might be too long. So let's cut that up into like some pieces and put that out as a series, I think is my next little video project. So keep an eye out for that. I don't know, maybe this week. We'll see if the first one comes out soon.
Awesome. All right. Well, then in that case, I think this soup's done, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye, everybody.